You are awake before the sun. A trumpet has shattered your sleep. You have 40 seconds to stand at attention or be beaten. Around you, 5,000 men are doing the same thing. Welcome to the most powerful military machine in human history. It smells of wood smoke, unwashed bodies, and boiling grain. It sounds like iron boots on stone. It feels nothing like the movies. This is not a glorious place. It is a machine. Every man in it is a part. Every part is expendable. Under Emperor Trajan, in the year 100 AD, Rome's empire stretches from Scotland to Syria, and it runs entirely on men like this. This is life inside history, life inside a Roman legion camp, year 100. From a distance, the camp looks like a city. It is one in every meaningful sense. 20 hectares, 5,000 men, built on campaign in a single afternoon. The Romans called it a castra. Every camp across the entire empire looked almost identical. Same dimensions, same layout, same rules, 2 centuries without a single redesign. The outer ditch, the fossa, was 2 meters deep, 3 wide, sharpened stakes at the base. At night, a sentry passed this point every 60 seconds. 4 gates, each named. The Porta Praetoria faced the enemy. You passed through it going to battle. You passed back through it or you didn't come back at all. The Greek historian Polybius described this exact camp design in 150 BC. By 100 AD, it hadn't changed in 2 centuries. If something keeps men alive, you do not redesign it. Outside the walls, the canopy, the unofficial town that grew around every Roman camp. Merchants, craftsmen, women, children, a shadow city that Rome pretended not to see. Inside, controlled silence. The Via Principalis cut the camp in half. Every building had a position. Every man had a designated place to stand and run and die. The smell hit you before you reached the gate. 5,000 men, 5,000 horses, latrines and tanneries and kitchens all within one wall. You smelled Rome before you saw it. The permanent fortress at Caerleon in Wales housed the Second Augustan Legion for over 300 years. The stone walls they built still stand. The empire that built them does not. Permanence was deceptive, because inside these walls everything that mattered was designed for one purpose, not to endure, to destroy. The heart of every Roman camp was the Principia, the headquarters building, the size of a cathedral. Every order that killed or saved 5,000 men originated here. Inside the Principia's inner shrine, the Aquila, the eagle, sacred, eternal. Losing it in battle was worse than dying. Entire careers, entire families ended for it. The Praetorium, the legate's house, shared a wall with barracks where 8 men slept on straw, heated floors, private dining room. The empire's inequality was architectural. The legate commanded 5,000 men and answered to 1 man in Rome. Every decision he made, every battle, every posting, every punishment was recorded and judged. Between the Praetorium and the barracks, the granary, the hospital, the forge, the Roman camp was not a barracks. It was a self-sufficient industrial city that happened to carry weapons. The valetudinarium, the military hospital, was more advanced than anything a civilian would ever see. Dedicated wards, trained medics, iron surgical instruments, a library of medical texts. The fabrica, the forge, never stopped. Weapons broke, armor dented, nails bent. A legion consumed iron the way it consumed grain, endlessly, without pause. 80 men formed a century. 6 centuries formed a cohort. 10 cohorts formed a legion. Every level had its own space, its own hierarchy, its own precise rules of proximity and obedience. Morning assembly was public, in front of witnesses. Your failure was never private. The Roman army turned shame into a structural tool and used it every single day. The signifer, the standard bearer, also served as the unit's banker. Your savings were held in a tin box, underground below the Principia. He was the most trusted man in the cohort. Under Trajan, a legionary earned 1,200 denarii per year. After food deductions, equipment levies, and the burial club fee, he kept roughly 400. Rome was his employer and his landlord. Before money, before power, before religion, first came the daily question every soldier shared regardless of rank. What and how much am I going to eat today? The Roman army ran on grain, not meat, not glory, grain. Each soldier required roughly 1 kilogram of wheat per day. An entire legion consumed 5 metric tons every 24 hours. The army issued the grain raw. The soldiers ground it themselves, baked it themselves, and were charged for both. Even your bread was a debt you owed Rome. The bread was called panis militaris, hard, dense, flat. When wheat was scarce, they mixed in barley. Barley was officially classified as punishment food for cowardice in the field. Lentils, olives, olive oil, and pasca, vinegar diluted in water. The Romans discovered pasca cleaned wounds as well as quenched thirst. Every ration had a secondary military purpose. The optio managed the contubernium's food budget. 8 men pooled their grain ration and cooked together. Military life, at its most fundamental, was a domestic arrangement. The Vindolanda tablets from northern Britain document a military cook stretching rations for 80 men across 19 days when supply was meant to last 2 weeks. The math requires theft. Fresh meat appeared after a successful hunt or a supply convoy. On those days, those specific days, the smell of roasting pork physically changed the mood of the entire camp. Wine was issued diluted, 1 part wine, 2 parts water. Officers received it undiluted. In the Roman army, what you drank was your rank made liquid and poured daily into a cup. The granary at Inchthithil in Scotland, excavated by archaeologists, could hold enough grain for the entire 20th Legion for a full year. Feeding an army was half the logistics of any war. When supply lines broke, and they did, soldiers ate leather, then horses, then waited. The feast and the famine traveled the same road in the same cart, separated by 1 broken wheel. 8 men, 1 room, approximately 4.5 square meters of sleeping space. This was the contubernium, the tent group, your closest family for 25 years. They called themselves contubernales, tentmates. Even in permanent stone forts, soldiers still used the old word. Habits from 2 centuries of sleeping on campaign ground die slowly. The straw pallets were called grabatoi, thin, damp in cold weather, shared with fleas. A new recruit's first week was spent learning to sleep through constant itching. Lice combs made of bone or antler have been recovered in Roman forts from Scotland to Syria. They are so common that archaeologists treat them as standard-issue equipment, which they effectively were. Adjacent to the sleeping room, the arma, the armory vestibule. Shield, pilum, gladius, 1 step away at all times. The architecture of the barracks was the architecture of instant readiness. Personal possessions, 1 oil lamp, 1 wax tablet, a small box of coins, a clay figurine of Mithras or Jupiter. That was the inventory of a life. 8 seconds to pack it all. There was no privacy. None. You dressed in front of 8 men. You cried in front of 8 men. You had nightmares in front of 8 men who had heard them all before. What passed for romance or intimacy happened in the canopy beyond the walls. Inside the camp, you belonged entirely to Rome. Your body was state property. Your time was scheduled. In Germanic and British winters, the stone walls conducted cold directly to sleeping men. 8 bodies sharing heat were the heating system. There was no alternative. You were fuel for yourself. The hypocaust Roman underfloor heating existed in the bathhouse, the hospital, and the legate's house. Not in the barracks, not for you. Innovation in Rome followed rank upward. The nights were never silent. Someone always snored. Someone always had the watch. Someone always came back from the canopy at the third hour, stepping on everyone to reach his pallet. 25 years, the full service term, 25 winters on a gravitas, 25 years of scratching, and at the end, if you survived, land and citizenship confirmed and your name on bronze. The forica, the communal latrine, a long stone bench, 20 or more open seats, no partitions between them. You defecated next to your centurion. Hierarchy did not extend to privacy of bodily function. Running water flushed the channel beneath. A marvel of Roman engineering that also channeled the gastrointestinal contents of 5,000 men through the same narrow drain simultaneously. Instead of toilet paper, the xylospongium, a sea sponge on a wooden stick, stored between uses in a shared pot of salt water, shared by every man who sat there, no exceptions recorded. Archaeologists excavating the latrine at Vindolanda Fort found eggs from intestinal parasites on the sponge deposits. However advanced Roman plumbing was, Roman hygiene was not what they advertised. And yet, the bathhouse, the thermae, was among the first buildings erected in any permanent fort. The Roman military understood that dirty soldiers got sick. Sick soldiers couldn't fight. No soap. You cleaned with olive oil and a curved metal scraper called a strigil. Rub on, scrape off, the day goes with it. By modern microbiological standards, the day mostly stayed. The bathhouse was also the intelligence hub. Gossip, gambling, and negotiations between men who couldn't speak freely in formation all happened here. Information traveled faster in steam than in scrolls. Clean bodies, parasitic worms, and the most sophisticated sewage system in the ancient world, all inside the same wall. Roman civilization was always that specific contradiction. Every morning, before bread, before orders, ritual. The Roman soldier's day began not with his own will but with the gods, or at least with the public performance of believing in them. The Sacelum, the shrine inside the Principia, held both the eagle and the emperor's image. Venerating the standards was venerating the state. The gods and the government shared the same room. Jupiter, Mars, Juno, Minerva, official gods, mandatory gods. But soldiers chose their own gods too. And the most popular deity in the Roman army of 100 AD was Persian in origin. Mithras, the bull slayer. His cult spread through the legions like contagion. Over 400 Mithria have been found, from Britain to Mesopotamia. No other religion came close among soldiers. Mithras' initiation had 7 grades, ranked like military promotion. The cult was structured exactly like the army: hierarchy, brotherhood, secrecy, advancement by merit. An army within the army. Death was bureaucratized. Every fort had an external cemetery and a collegium, a burial club, funded by a mandatory monthly deduction from every soldier's pay. Your death was pre-financed by your living. Before any engagement, a haruspex read the entrails of a sacrificed animal for omens. Emperor Trajan consulted them before crossing the Danube in 101 AD. The ritual made commanders accountable to the divine. Religion in the Roman camp was not comfort. It was schedule. It was the story that transformed organized slaughter into sacred duty, and that sacred duty had a very specific price tag. The Roman army did not run on loyalty. It ran on the specific fear of a specific object, the vitus, the centurion's vine staff. The sound of it cutting air was the sound of Roman power at its smallest scale. The historian Tacitus records a centurion of the Rhine legions nicknamed Cedo Alteram, "Give me another," because he broke so many vine staffs on his soldiers' backs that he demanded replacements constantly. Above the centurion, the tribune; above the tribune, the legate; above all, the emperor. Trajan in 100 AD had served as a soldier and a commander. He knew every pressure point of this machine because he had felt them. The gladius, 22 inches of double-edged iron, not designed for slashing, for stabbing. Step inside an opponent's swing, push the shield, thrust once into the torso. 7 inches deep. Done. The pilum was engineered to deform on impact. Its iron shank bent after striking a shield, making it impossible to throw back and dragging the shield down. It was not a weapon, it was a trap. Training was daily, without exception. Soldiers drilled with wooden swords double the weight of the real thing. When you finally held iron, it felt weightless. That was the point. The testudo, the tortoise formation. Shields interlocked above, front, and sides. An armored box that moved. Trajan's legions used it crossing the Danube under arrow fire in 101 AD. Decimation. Every 10th man in a unit that had fled battle was executed, by lot, by his own tent mates, with their hands. It happened at least twice under Augustus. Rome made obedience more terrifying than the enemy. Decimation was never about punishing the few. It was about making the survivors feel something stronger than fear of the enemy. It worked because Rome understood terror as an engineering problem. On the other side of all that violence, the diploma, a bronze certificate issued on honorable discharge, land, confirmed citizenship, the legal right to marry. Rome paid its debts in 25-year installments. The Roman army consumed approximately 70% of the empire's annual tax revenue. It was the largest employer in the ancient world. The empire did not support the army. The army was the empire. And behind every soldier who could march, there were people who never could, people whose labor made the march possible. The women of the camp, who we turn to now. Roman law forbade legionaries from legal marriage during their full 25 years of service. This law dated to the Republic. It would not be lifted until Emperor Septimius Severus in 197 AD. But men are men. Women lived in the vicus, the civilian settlement attached to every fort, called focaria, literally hearthwoman, unofficial wives, unrecognized by Roman law, indispensable to Rome. She cooked, washed, managed the household's finances when her soldier deployed, and raised children with no legal father. If he died in service, she received nothing from Rome, not one coin. Her children were legally fatherless under Roman law. The term was spuriae. Many of those sons enlisted the day they were old enough. The army sustained itself partly by consuming the families it produced. In approximately 100 AD, Claudia Severa, wife of a fort commander in northern Britain, wrote what is now the earliest surviving letter in Latin in a woman's own handwriting. It was found at Vindolanda. She invited her friend Sulpicia Lepidina to her birthday celebration. She wrote, "The day would be more enjoyable with you there," found in Yorkshire, written on wood, surviving nearly 2,000 years. Most women in the vicus were not officers' wives. They were merchants, herbalists, midwives. The Vindolanda tablets record a woman selling goods to the garrison. Her name is partially illegible. It was real. When the legion moved, and it always moved, these women faced the choice: follow on foot with children and belongings, or stay and rebuild somewhere else. Most followed. They always had. The Roman Empire was built as much by the women who made soldiers functional as by the soldiers themselves. Rome knew this. It used this. It deducted nothing from their wages because it paid them nothing. Their absence from the official record was a choice made by men who wrote history in the same camps where women made history possible. That silence was its own form of power, and its own form of cowardice. Roman military justice was both ruthless and precise. It was not arbitrary. It had procedure, it had precedent, and it had punishments carefully designed to be worse than dying in battle. The fustuarium. If found guilty of desertion or cowardice, the condemned soldier was beaten to death by his own unit, beginning with his centurion, using fists, stones, and staffs, in front of everyone. Falling asleep on watch, capital offense. Stealing from a comrade, flogging and public degradation, missing muster 3 times without cause, pay reduction and public beating before the full century. Polybius documented these punishments in full detail in 150 BC. By 100 AD, they had been in continuous operation for 250 years, unchanged. Discipline here was not policy. It was theology. Theology that worked, measured in territory conquered. But the system also protected. A centurion who abused the vine stick without just cause could be, and was, reported to the tribune. A papyrus from 81 AD records a soldier's formal complaint against his centurion. The system heard him. Pay deductions were codified. Food, equipment, burial club. A papyrus from Masada in Judea, dated precisely to around 73 AD, shows a Roman soldier's itemized pay account, deducted amounts recorded to the individual denarius. Rome's bureaucracy protected as it extracted. Before dawn, the cornicen, the horn player, sounds the first call. It is still dark. 5,000 men rise from their straw frames simultaneously. No hesitation is permitted. The horn is enough. By 6 a.m., morning sacrifice at the Principia altar. The priest burns grain and oil wine. The eagle standard catches the first gray light through the open door. A century files past in silence. The day is ritually opened. By 7 a.m., roll call and duty assignment. The optio reads the day's orders. 30 men to construction, 20 to foraging, the rest to drill. Sick report to the hospital. No excuses without a surgeon's documentation. By 9 a.m., the drill ground. Wooden swords twice the weight of real ones. The same thrust repeated 600 times. The same footwork, centurions moving through the rows. The vine stick swings without warning. Perfection is the only acceptable standard. At midday, organized rest. Men return to barracks, hard biscuit, water, oil the armor. The Roman soldier's relationship with his equipment was not pride of possession, it was survival logic. A rusting joint seized in battle. A seized joint ended a life. By 2 p.m., afternoon construction detail. The road from Roman York to London still follows the exact route legionaries cleared in 71 AD. They were not just an army. They were an infrastructure project. The empire they built outlasted the empire that ordered it. By 4 p.m., weapons cleaning. Every iron surface scraped and oiled. A soldier found with rust on his blade at inspection was punished before the enemy ever had the chance. The weapon was not a tool of last resort. It was daily responsibility. At dusk, the evening meal. The contubernium gathers at their fire. Pools, pasca, garum, the creak of leather, the distant sound of horses, the smell of 8 men who have been moving since before darkness and will move again before dawn. By 8 p.m., guard rotation. 1/4 of the camp on watch at all times. The night's password, changed every 24 hours, passed in whispers at the gate. A wrong answer in darkness was answered with a pilum. No warnings were issued. By 10 p.m., most men asleep. Someone is coughing in the dark. Someone mutters from a dream. One man still awake, picking lice from the seam of his tunic in the dying light of the oil lamp. The camp breathes. Midnight, third vigilia. The camp almost dark. Sentinels as shadows on the walls, an owl somewhere. The distant river. The empire at rest, 4,000 bodies suspended between 2 identical days, held in place by iron and oath. One soldier lies awake staring at the ceiling, 22 years old, 17 years remaining to serve. He tries to remember his mother's face. He cannot hold it clearly anymore. History is not built from empires. It is built from that precise moment of forgetting. They did not call themselves heroes. They called themselves military soldiers. They were builders, bakers, surgeons, engineers, and killers, often all 5 before breakfast. 25 years of service. Campaigns, disease, freezing winters, and violence. At the end, a bronze diploma, A soldier's name, his unit, his citizenship, proof stamped in metal that he had existed, that something of him would outlast him. The castra they built have been excavated from Scotland to Syria. The roads they laid still carry traffic. The legal frameworks they administered still echo in courts today. This was not just a military camp. This was the operating system of civilization. They were not gentle. They were not innocent. But inside those walls, in cold barracks on bleeding feet, eating grain beside 7 men who knew their name, they endured. This was life inside history. Next time on Life Inside History, imagine waking in a European city in 1348. Not in a castle, not a noble house, in a city where half the population will be dead within 18 months, and the bodies are already in the street. If these walls felt real to you, leave a comment. Subscribe, because history is not a subject to be memorized. It is a place, and we have barely begun to go inside it.